All right, so this is Hunter. I'm Veronica. We are the owners of Endswell Funeral Home. Endswell was the first aquamation facility in this part of North Carolina. I don't think of North Carolina as super progressive in a lot of ways, but with aquamation, we have more than any other state right now, which is pretty cool. So I'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the aquamation section. We also offer green burial and low emission cremation. A lot of what is important at Endswell is that we're offering options for families that are more environmentally friendly. So we'll talk about all of these as we go. And then Endswell is a supporter of the Good Death movement. So we believe that this is something we should be talking about. It allows us to make choices that better align with us and our families. And if we talk about it in advance, we have the opportunity to do that. So Hunter and I will tag team a little bit. He'll jump in if I don't explain something well. But we're both run Endswell every day and are there, and so we can both tell stories about what it's like helping our families. How did we get started in this? Neither of us had a background in the funeral space, and if you had asked either of us as children, I do not think we would have said, yep, that's what I'm gonna do. But at the end of 2021, Desmond Tutu passed away, and he chose aquamation. And some of you may recall that it was in the newspapers for a couple weeks. Hunter happened to read the first article he read while sitting across the street from Westwood Cemetery in Carrboro. And he's reading about Desmond Tutu and the option of aquamation. And he's looking out, and he says it's the first time he realized that all the flowers there were plastic. And he's like, why would we, in the middle of a housing crisis, take all of this land and use it for this and then put fake flowers into the ground? There has to be a better way. So he read about aquamation, he comes home, he tells me about it, we talk about it a lot. Most of the world moved on and didn't think about aquamation again. My dear husband instead chose to put down a deposit on an aquamation machine, which we then had to figure out where it would go because it wasn't coming to my house. So that is how Endswell all started. So you can go to the next slide. So I mentioned before that we're part of the Good Death movement, and I'm actually going to let Hunter talk about this a little bit. I think he can explain it pretty well.
So the Good Death movement is a movement unfolding all over the U.S., and it's just really to foster open and honest conversations about death, dying, and end-of-life planning. People get together at death cafes, which we'll talk about later. They talk about how to care for a partner with a neurodegenerative condition, medical aid in dying, and how to put a plan in place that aligns with their values. So it's really about having open and honest conversations about a taboo subject that a lot of people don't want to talk about, even though it's happening to everyone at some point. And that gives us a little more control, a little more security, and it makes things a little less scary to have these conversations with other friends in our family. You could have done that.
I know, I wanted you to feel important. So in general, I think Endswell sees itself as a resource to the community and more than just a funeral home. We want to be out having conversations like this. We want to have resources at our facility too, like the death cafes that we'll talk about. So that's why we see ourselves part of this. Next slide. So let's talk about death care, the funeral care space. And I'm going to call it a funeral industry because that's what it is. Long ago, this is what all of our ancestors practiced, and many people in the world still practice. The family came together after someone passed. Maybe someone made a casket. Maybe they were just wrapped in clothing and took them to the cemetery themselves. I'm going to note here that a lot of times the people providing care during this time were the women. Just like we had midwives that would come in from the community and would help a family through a major transition, the women in the community, the mothers, the grandmothers, would come in and they would often bathe the body. And then each community had different practices. Some would place stones over the eyes to keep them closed. Some would wrap them in certain things. Some would just move them into the casket and help set up that. But it was very much a community practice of caring for someone that they all knew and loved. You can go to the next slide. So this was, as I said, our standard practice for many, many years. It only changed when, on the next slide, we had the Civil War. Why did it change during this time? we had Union soldiers that we needed to get home. And the only way that the train stations, the railways would handle transporting them was if we found a way to preserve those bodies. So suddenly, there's a rise of individuals using creosote, formaldehyde, anything they can to preserve a body, and shipping that home. This is when this care switched to mostly men, and they were called morticians. So they spent a lot of time trying to create, as I mentioned, an industry where they had to have specific experience and education to do this work. You can go to the next slide. And this is where we are today. I'm being a little cheeky with this slide, I know. But I will say, you can buy a casket from Costco. You can't go into the store, they don't have any on the floor. But if you go online, you can order a casket. Again, I'm being somewhat funny when I say this, but if a family wanted to have a traditional casket and cost were a question for them, they could, in fact, purchase it outside of a funeral home. You can always bring your own goods in. So you could purchase an urn from an artist you know, or from Etsy, and the funeral home should not charge you any extra to use those things. I will say, as someone who works at a funeral home, if you're planning on having this delivered, please coordinate with them. If it were to show up during someone else's service, that would be very challenging to work around. So I'll note that. Okay, you can go to the next slide. All right, so if we don't want to have what we just saw, and instead we want to have something that's more environmentally conscious and intentional, what are some options we have? So we're going to go over all of these today. I do say cremation, sort of, because we'll talk about that, and Hunter, jump in if you want to. But we'll go through all of these. You can go to the next slide. So cremation, I think we all assume that we know exactly what cremation is. I'm going to go to the next slide, and I'm going to explain it in a little more detail, and I promise not to do anything too gross today, but I think one thing that's happened as care has moved away from the community is that there's a lot we don't see, and so there's a lot we don't ask questions about. And in order for me to explain all of our newer options and make them make sense, I need to explain some of the options we know about. So with cremation, the part of the body that's going to break down, the part we can't keep. Actually, side note here, I think a lot of us would keep more of the body if we could. I was sitting on Hunter's mother's bed with her one day, going through some jewelry. You're making a face. This is a true story. Going through jewelry that she wanted me to have. And she opens a little box. It was a tiny little box, and 7 or 8 small things flew out. And I was like, I picked one up and I was like, is this a tooth? And she was like, oh, yes, those are John's baby teeth. So she had one little box for Hunter's brother's baby teeth and one little box for Hunter's baby teeth. I did tell her I did not need his brother's. That brother could have them back. I didn't see that the same day, though. So I think a lot of us would keep more of the bodies if we could. But there's a part of the body that's going to break down. And we need to do something with that. So with cremation, the way that's handled is with high temperatures and fire. Often it takes, for cremation to happen, 2 to 4 hours. And we're talking about temperatures of 1,400 degrees to 1,800 degrees. So these are very high temperatures. Once that body has been exposed to those temperatures and broken down, we are left with mostly skeletal remains. We take those skeletal remains, and every crematory around has a tool called a cremulator. It breaks them down into the consistency we know of as ash. I think a lot of us think of it as campfire ash, but it's really bone dust that's been broken down. Anything to add? Okay, so we're going to move on to aquamation, and I put these next to each other because it's helpful to explain them. You can go to my next slide. So aquamation results in the same thing coming back to the family. So with aquamation, you're also getting an urn back. It's more environmentally friendly than cremation because there's no greenhouse gas emissions, like there is with cremation, and it takes significantly less energy. With cremation, to keep those temperatures, like I said, at 14 to 1,800 degrees, we're talking about a lot of natural gas usage. So aquamation doesn't have that need. With aquamation, we take water and an alkaline solution and we circulate that around the body. I mentioned cremation's often 2 to 4 hours. Aquamation's not a lot longer, it's 6 to 8 hours. So we circulate that around the body and we too are left with the same thing. We use the same tool that they do with cremation. It's a cremulator, and it breaks it down into a powder like ash. Now with aquamation, you actually get a little more back. There's no chimney effect, so you're not losing any of the bone dust through the chimney. It's also very, very white. So if anybody here has interacted with cremation remains, you may have noticed that it had a grayish or brownish tint, or even a light green or blue tint. The more colorful ones often based on fabrics that the person had on. So certain synthetic fabrics will burn very vibrant colors, and that imparts onto the ashes. But with aquamation, that's not happening. Again, there's no combustion, so there's no darkening. It almost looks like baking powder. So for better or for worse, you get more back, and it's very, very white. Anything to add, Hunter Beatty? Okay. We can go to the next slide. Oh, perfect. Okay, so I mentioned that both of these processes are very industrial. This is a traditional cremation retort. This is an aquamation machine. So if you have been to a funeral home and witnessed a cremation, you've probably seen it happen where there was drywall or plaster put in front of this, and you were in a little room and there was just this part that opened up. But if it's in its own space in the building, it'll look like that. The aquamation machine also looks very industrial, right? Like it is handling, processing our remains. So this one is a little different than the one we have. The one we have is like this, a cylinder, but we don't have everything around it. So you can see exactly what ours looks like when you see it. We do invite people to come to Endswell. You're welcome to come to one of our information sessions and actually see the machine if you want to. It's something that we think is important. We don't want to be part of the group that doesn't expose everything. We want to help you see what everything could look like. Do you want to add anything about aquamation? Okay. All right, so let's talk about green burial and conservation burial. So green burial is very similar to traditional burial, which all of us have seen, I'm sure, with the exception of we're not using anything that can't break down. So there are no embalming fluids unless they're approved by the Green Burial Council. There's no concrete vault. And if there is a casket, it is made of soft wood, like pine or woven willow. So this means that everything that's buried can return to the earth. This is very different than the Union soldiers that were transported on the railway. I would say at Endswell, we do this a lot. We work very closely with Bluestem, and I'll show a slide for them in a moment. But it is a great opportunity because this is one of the choices where families often want to participate. And so families are welcome to help prepare someone, whatever choice they have. But for green burial, I think often the families have already made the commitment that they're going to help with filling the grave in with dirt, so they want to be part of the process throughout. And I have some great stories of families that have done that if people are interested. Why does green burial work? So with traditional burial, we often place the casket inside of a concrete vault, much lower in the ground. If you've seen a concrete vault, it's about 4 feet tall, and it is a box with a flat top that goes into the ground that the casket goes in. Why are they used? They're used because the people that mow the grass at the cemetery want everything to be totally flat, right? They don't ever want to experience a divot or a little bit of a hump up. With green burial or conventional, or with green burial or conservation burial, one of the things that you can do during the burial process is any dirt that comes out goes back on top. So that does mean for the first few months you might have a small mound, but that's not a problem. It will fall back into place over time. Some cultures will use rocks and put them on top of the grave. That's really common in a couple Native American cultures to do that. That's not necessary. People often ask me, can't wildlife get in? No, we're still burying deep enough that that is not a concern at all. Okay, so I keep saying conservation burial. What do I mean when I say that? So conservation burial is green burial, but it's happening at a place where you're also ensuring long-term conservation of that land. We are very lucky in North Carolina. There are actually 2 conservation burial grounds in North Carolina. I think that's the most of any state. I'm pretty sure that, yes, it is. He says yes. So one of them is located in Hurdle Mills, so very close to here. It's called Bluestem. They have beautiful pastures and nature trails, and it feels like you're out on a walk in nature. It doesn't feel like you're at a cemetery, like if you had visited one of our municipal cemeteries. You can go to the next slide. I mentioned Bluestem in Hurdle Mills. This is just a picture of one of their pastures. They also do burial in the forest. So when I'm talking to families, that's definitely part of the conversation. Does someone have more of a desire to be buried among the trees or out in the pasture with the flowers? Here are some examples of some of the shrouds and caskets, because I think it's helpful to picture these. One thing I love about green burial is that you're able to bring in flowers and leaves and other vibrant colors to help show how unique someone was. So here we have a very simple pine box, and you can see it's placed over the grave. When they go to lower it, they'll actually, the ropes are through the handles on the casket. They'll lift those. Other people will remove the wood, and then together with between 6 and 8 people, they'll lower the casket down. Bluestem does have volunteers, so if are individuals that don't have family and others that can support with this, between the Endswell team and the Bluestem team, we can help. Most of the burial grounds that do green burial and conservation burial choose to do this hand lowering versus the contraptions that we've all seen at the larger funerals. This is an example. This one's actually being lowered as the picture is taken. That is a shroud. So she is in very simple cotton, white fabric that was wrapped around her. The blue ribbons that were used to tie her was fabric that was important to her. And I don't know in this case if it was a tablecloth. I think that it was, that the family thought was really important and identified with her. But they chose that fabric, and then flowers were placed inside at each of the ties to just, again, create some color. Next slide. Okay, so human composting. I heard some people talking about this when we first walked in. What is human composting? Is it just that we throw somebody out in the bin in the back and in the end we're done? Not quite. It's not currently legal here in North Carolina, but Endswell has partnered with a company that does this. It's now legal in around 10 states, maybe a little more than that. It does keep happening every week. More and more are legalizing it. But most places aren't practicing yet. So Recompose, and Katrina Spade was the first person to figure out how to do this. And she opened Recompose in Washington State. And so Endswell has a relationship with Recompose and can help families that really want this get out to Washington and have human composting. So what is it? Human composting, much like green burial, is a way of returning to the earth. So with human composting, you're placed inside of a vessel with alfalfa and other things that will break down with you. And you're kept at consistent temperatures, slightly above what we would find comfortable to help break down the body. This takes around 3 months. After the part of the body that will break down has broken down, they too break down the skeletal structure, just like I talked about with cremation and aquamation, and mix that back into the soil. They do that on purpose. Our skeletal structure, our bones, are very alkaline with the calcium. And so mixing it into the very nutrient-rich soil that's been created with the rest of our body, it becomes a very balanced soil that can actually be used. One thing I will note is you get a lot of soil back. You get a full pickup bed of soil back, so that's a lot of soil. And here in North Carolina, that's all considered human remains. So our families that are thinking about doing this have to figure out what they're going to do with that amount of soil. Well, you can put it on private property, so you can put it on your garden. But if you were going to put it here, that would be a little more complicated because they'd have to allow you to do it, and they may, but that would be a conversation to have that I couldn't answer. One thing that will happen for a lot of families that choose to do human composting is that they'll go ahead and keep a very small amount, maybe a bag full, that they'll use to plant something in, and then the rest they'll donate to reforestation, mostly in Washington State right now, because that's where the facilities that can offer human composting are. I mentioned legality of human composting. The ones in the darker green, so over here, mostly on the West Coast, or where you can do it now, or where it's legal now. Again, Oregon and Washington are the only ones that have operational facilities. There are a few in yellow. Since this chart came out, one of those has actually legalized it. So this is growing in popularity, and I think more and more people are asking questions about it. And I will answer questions in just a second. All right. Okay, so anatomical gift. This is not necessarily a form of disposition that you're doing that gets rid of the body, but it is something that is such a gift to the community that we want to include it. So we're very lucky here in North Carolina, and in this area specifically, we have so many schools, medical schools, that are able to take full body donations for their medical school students. So we have UNC, Duke, Elon, all of them are looking to take full body donations that their students can then learn from. When you do this, your body goes to the school, they do whatever they need to. Sometimes it's for 2 months, sometimes it's for 8 months. They usually guarantee that they will return cremated remains to the family in about a year. We have some things up here, some of the places that you can do it. I mentioned UNC, Duke, and Elon. But this one does come with some complexities. A lot of these schools are only open Monday through Friday from 8 to 5, so you have to die during those hours. We don't always get to plan that. I am, again, being slightly cheeky there. You can work with the funeral home to go into their care until the school can receive you. But they also have pretty significant criteria about what allows you to go in. So if you weigh too little or you weigh too much, they might not accept you. And one that's really hard is families that assume this is the path they're taking. If someone gets a bed sore and then that infection spreads at all, sometimes they can't be received. So if this is the path, I always tell people to have a backup plan, but it is such a gift to be able to give your whole body to that research. Another one I have listed here is Western Carolina Body Farm. So this is a different type of full body donation, but one that I get a lot of questions about, so I'll mention it. This is a place, it's actually at Western North Carolina University, but it is a place where individuals that are working in the forensics field can go and learn. So you'll have investigators, you'll have medical examiners, you'll have people that need to understand what happens to a body over time, interacting with those bodies over time. So they're laid out often in a field in different conditions so that we can understand what happens during different times of year, if someone's in an area with more moisture or less moisture, if certain bugs are involved. So it's helpful then when we have any unexplained situation, we have information that we can use from this. Before we move on, want to mention organ donation, because I sometimes have people not sure how full body donation works compared to organ donation. So these options here are all for full body donation. And very often what the family gets back is cremated remains, often about a year later. With organ donation, you often have to die in medical supervision. So it's not often under hospice care. It's that something traumatic has happened and you're in the hospital, or you pass at the scene of the car accident and you're immediately brought under care of the EMTs. Why? If it's something like your heart or your kidneys that they're just trying to save to give to someone else, they have to put you on life support right away so that blood is still flowing. Then they can do the operation to allow them to be given to someone else. So I have a lot of families that say, oh, that's what I wanted to do. What's the closest thing I can do to it? I'm now in my late 80s. I don't think anyone wants this. So again, if you're in hospice care, it's very unlikely that you'll have the ability to donate your organs, but there's still things you could donate if you wanted to. For some people, our corneas can still be donated, and then our skin and our ligaments can be really helpful. Skin is used for burn victims, so there's still things we can choose to donate. They just won't be full body donation, so you'll still end up working with a funeral home to ensure that whatever your other wishes are met. Okay, so I try to be a little funny with my slides. I apologize. So why would you work with a funeral home? What do they offer? I think funeral homes provide significant care when there's a lot going on. So if somebody had any type of medical intervention at the end, if you work with a funeral home, they're able to help support the family through removing anything that could still be on the body and then making the body something that the families can interact with if they want to. It's not legal to do most of the forms of disposition I mentioned in your own backyard. Colorado has one city where you can do cremation yourself, but otherwise you'll need to work with a funeral home for that. So in general, you'll be working with a funeral home. How do you find the right one? It's a really big decision to make, and so often we don't make that decision until those final days or even after someone's passed, and so we just call who we know. What I tell people that are planning in advance and thinking about it for themselves and for others, read reviews. Understand why a review might say what it does, if there's something you can read between the lines. Ask multiple funeral homes for their general price list. I called it GPLs here because that's what we call it in the industry. The general price list covers every single thing that you could be charged for, and it's kind of a confusing document, which the Federal Trade Commission says I'm not allowed to say, so don't tell on me, but there are a couple things that are redundant. So you can ask funeral homes questions about theirs. Make sure you actually know what you'll be charged for. And then talk to people that are in this space. People that work at hospice, people that work in the hospital that are often having to help families navigate these decisions. They're gonna have, even if they don't recommend a certain funeral home, they may say, you should be aware of this. The funeral home told you it was gonna be, $1,200, but that didn't include transportation. And so you just got hit with another $600 charge to get the person from your home to the funeral home that you weren't expecting. That's a significant increase. And so some of the people in these fields that are close by may be able to help with that and provide guidance. Perfect. So I told you guys at the beginning we would talk about death cafes. And I'm actually going to let Hunter talk about death cafes because he really does love them, so I'm handing the mic to him.
Okay, all right, thank you, baby. So just to kind of summarize, Veronica and I, we had no background in this industry. The only dead body I'd ever seen was my father's maybe 17 years ago after he died. He actually chose an assisted suicide after he was diagnosed with a neurodegenerative condition similar to Parkinson's, went from practicing anesthesiology at Johns Hopkins to shuffling around in Velcro shoes within about 3 months. So he worked with kind of an underground nonprofit that helped him end his life on his own terms. That was my first exposure to death, and then I did not think about it for another 16, 17 years up until I read about Desmond Tutu. So this has been kind of a wild experience for us. Definitely the most meaningful thing we've ever done. But early on, we were exposed to this idea of a death cafe. So the death cafe movement started in 2011. It came to the US from the UK in 2012, and there have now been over 20,000 death cafes in 93 countries. So people get together, we serve wine and mocktails and cheese and bread from Weaver Street Market. People bring a dish to share. The largest death cafe we had, I think there were 55 people at Endswell, so we now offer 2 a month because that group was just too large to permit really more intimate conversations. So there's no agenda at a death cafe. We'll have hospice nurses, people who worked at Duke Divinity School, young, morbidly curious 25-year-old students who just want to learn more about aquamation and eco-friendly death care. We have people who are in hospice care, actively dying. It's not a grief group, it's just an opportunity for people to come together and have open and honest conversations about death and dying so they can put a plan in place. Do you want me to say anything else? Take us home? So I think what struck me when I was reading this article about Desmond Tutu and sitting next to Westwood Cemetery was this practice of preserving a body with carcinogenic chemicals, placing that body into a non-biodegradable casket that might be more expensive than any single piece of furniture that most people have in their home, then putting that into a concrete vault in the middle of town, in the midst of an affordable housing crisis. So all of the articles about Desmond Tutu's decision to choose aquamation, they expose that this is an unsustainable industry. We cannot indefinitely put people in the middle of town as our municipal cemeteries are nearing capacity. The articles also made the argument that cremation, by burning the body, releases carcinogenic and toxic gases into the atmosphere. It's dependent on fossil fuels, on natural gas or propane, and it releases these harmful chemicals and any mercury, any plastic implants in the body, and that aquamation is a cleaner, and I know this sounds odd, but a gentler method of disposition. We're using lower temperatures, returning more ashes, and I think there's a lot of cultural and religious symbolism with water, with peace, rebirth, tranquility, the baptism. I really thought we were only going to be helping Prius driving, organic food eating, Carborough farmers market shopping people who cared about their environmental footprint. As it turns out, maybe 30% of the people who we help come in and they say, I just don't like the idea of fire cremation. It feels like I'm going to burn in hell. I like the idea of water. It feels gentler. So this is all a very personal decision. When we opened, we only offered aquamation. We started offering low-emission cremation because whenever a Hindu family approached us, the Hindu families, the way they would practice disposition in India would typically be burning on a funeral pyre. So we wanted to respect everyone's cultural traditions, religious traditions. We actually, I'll admit, provided embalming for someone recently. It was a family who wanted to ship a body back to El Salvador. So it's like, who are we, having flown all over the world and traveled, probably have a large carbon footprint in our lives, even though we care about the environment. Who are we to say, oh, no, we would never embalm? This is a family who needed to return their loved one to El Salvador, so we were able to accommodate that. But for the most part, we identify as an eco-friendly funeral home offering aquamation and green burial and low-emission cremation. And last year, we did the majority of green burials at Blue Stem Conservation Cemetery. It is absolutely beautiful. I do recommend a tour there. It does not look like any other municipal cemetery you've ever been to. They've planted native grasses. As Veronica said, you can get buried in the forest or the meadow. There are wildflowers everywhere. There are little gazebos and meditation spaces. It feels very different than a municipal cemetery. So I think that's it. I think we'll open it up for questions. Feel free to ask about anatomical gift programs, any other details about aquamation that we didn't answer in the presentation. Okay. No, go ahead. We're at that time.
Where do you get a willow casket?
So a willow casket. There's a casket maker in Asheville. Her company is called Moss and Thistle, and she weaves these willow baskets that are absolutely gorgeous. Families can actually go and help make the casket with her. We can also source some that aren't handmade. They're a little less expensive. I think her price is $2,700 for a hand-woven willow casket, which compared to the traditional casket is not that expensive, but we wanted to offer affordable options as well. So we have some that are not handmade. Moss and Thistle in Asheville. Yes, Sarah Lasswell is the artist. And we have a number of woodworkers in this area who make wood caskets as well, if you want something more simple.
One thing I'll say about the willow casket that's really nice is that with the pine boxes, those are very rectangular. It's very practical and utilitarian. The willow caskets are curved because of how you have to weave the willow around. They also have an amazing smell because it's fresh willow that's being used. So when we have families choosing that, there's something that feels very alive where all of your senses can see just like the lines that are curved and the smells. And I do really love the willow caskets.
I'm a basket collector. You can imagine how excited I was when I saw that.
She does invite people to her studio. We've had families where someone was near their final days, and other people from their family went out. They had a few months, but other people from their family went out and actually spent time with her, helping make this individual's casket, which I think was very meaningful for them. But if it's something you're interested in for yourself, she has open studios where she lets people from the community come in and just learn more too. So you should look up Moss and Thistle online.
We help a lot of families who don't want any involvement in any aspect of this. And then we help families who want to be involved in every aspect of it. So we are open 24/7. We'll send our transportation team, take someone into our care, and provide aquamation, and then hand deliver this eco-friendly bamboo urn that we include with the service, or they choose one of our urns in our urn gallery. One of the things we noted early on is that most funeral homes will import mass-produced urns with doves and angels' wings and an American eagle on the flag for the veteran, made in China, right? So we worked with local artists. We have a veteran who makes all of our wooden boxes and hand-turned urns, but we have about 300 all made by North Carolina artists, and we hand-deliver that to the family. So some people actually don't even come to Endswell at all. Other people will come and help us shroud the body for green burial, put essential oils on the body, wash the body, lay North Carolina wildflowers on top, follow us to Blue Stem Conservation Cemetery, and the family will actually lower the body into the grave there. So we do find a lot with the green burial people we help. There's a lot of family participation that you don't necessarily get with a traditional funeral home or with conventional burial practices. Yes?
Just the general cost difference between aquamation, cremation, conservation burial.
Sure. So aquamation tends to be a little bit more expensive. I would say $300 to $500 more than cremation. But there's quite a cost spectrum of funeral care. So we teach continuing education credit classes to Duke and UNC hospice nurses and social workers about how to navigate working with a funeral home. What do they provide? Why can you get a $1,000 cremation at one end of the spectrum, or a $4,500 cremation at the other end of the spectrum, and you're getting the same thing? You're getting a bag of ashes back. So what we've seen in the last 20 years is a proliferation of high-volume crematoriums. They might be in a strip mall next to a Subway sandwich store and a tobacco shop over here. They don't cremate on site. They try to have minimal interaction with the family. You make your arrangements online. They'll work with a low-cost mortuary transport provider, transport directly to a high-volume crematorium with 4 or 5 cremation chambers, and they're so high volume that they're able to offer cremation for $1,000. At the other end of the spectrum, you have a funeral home that's been in our community for 50 to 100 years. I think Walkers in Chapel Hill sold their downtown building for $8 million. If you're going to work with a funeral home that's been in the community for 100 years and they have expensive downtown real estate, paying taxes, all the overheads, staffing and preparing for a complex graveside service, you're going to pay at the other end of that spectrum closer to $4,500 for a simple cremation. At Endswell, we charge $3,000 for a cremation, $3,500 for aquamation. We don't have hidden fees at Endswell. If anything, we offer discounts when families need it or offer payment plans. So we include everything: the transportation, hand delivery of the eco-friendly urn, certified death certificates, the obituary, the family viewing of the body if requested. So we don't have hidden fees. I mean, that is something to watch out for. A lot of the lower cost cremation providers, they don't incorporate necessary charges into that advertised cost. But so those are our prices, but it's difficult for people to navigate that spectrum of costs and quality of service, which is why we tell people, if you're able to get multiple quotes, meet with people at a funeral home, call, and read reviews. You know, ask hospice nurses, ask your doctor, ask your estate attorney for a recommendation, because there's a spectrum of cost, but also quality of service, like you find in any industry. So with burial, you know, plots range in our area. Let's see, Westwood Cemetery is $1,600 for a green burial or conventional burial plot. They just released 300 green burial plots at Westwood Cemetery. That is if you're a Chapel Hill resident or any resident of any community. If you're a Carborough resident, it's $800 for a plot. If you know a Carborough resident and they're the one to buy it for you, it's $800 a plot. So Blue Stem is about $4,000 a plot. It's a lot more expensive, but Blue Stem provides all of the support for the family and assists lowering the body into the grave. When you go to Westwood Cemetery, no one is there. You're actually dealing with the Public Works Department when you buy a cemetery plot at a municipal cemetery. So plots range in our area from about $1,200 to $4,000 for green burial, plus the expense of working with the funeral home. Burial, you know, I think in 1950, the cremation rate was about 3% in the US. Now it's over 60%. Cremation and aquamation are much more affordable. There's no plot, there's no casket, there's no headstone. And they're much more convenient for a family. You don't have a graveside service to organize days after your partner or your parent has died. You can proceed with cremation or aquamation and then months later organize a celebration of life. So I think we'll continue to see cremation and aquamation rates increase for that reason. Questions? How does aquamation really work?
Your services. Is there, like, do you pay for everything all up front, or is there like a phased payment? Like, you get engaged and then when I die, you collect the rest of the money for the services that you render there?
Sure.
Or do you like collect the whole thing up front?
No, so we tell everyone, even younger people now, based on everything we've learned, accidents we've seen, it is smart to convey to next of kin and friends what you want done with your body. It is even better to have a number for them to call, for you to figure out who you would like to work with. You should be the one to read reviews, to talk to your estate attorney, to find the best option for you and your family based on your budget and your needs. You can pre-plan with a funeral home for free. We have families who have pre-planned with us here, but they spend half the year in Florida. They've pre-planned with a funeral home in Florida too. And based on where they die, they'll go to Endswell if they're here, or the funeral home in Florida if they're down there. You can also prepay. We only offer inflation-proof contracts at Endswell. They allow people to lock in our current pricing, so no extra funds are due at the time of death. You can pay the full amount now, or you can, set up a payment plan for that. Yeah, you don't have to prepay with a funeral home. The reason people do it, and funeral homes really push it on you. Most funeral homes make a lot of commission when you prepay with them. They don't get the money up front. For good reason, funeral homes do not keep the money when you prepay. But many get commission, especially when they don't offer inflation-proof contracts. We only offer inflation-proof to lock in our current pricing. So most people prepay to ensure that next of kin have no financial burden at the time of death, or to just make sure everything is taken care of, or to lock in current pricing. But you can prepay all at once, or you can set up a payment plan. Most prepayment contracts, the ones that we offer, are fully transferable to another funeral home. If you were to die out of state, your next of kin would call us. We would transfer that policy to another funeral home.
What is low emission cremation?
So low emission cremation, so older cremation facilities, older cremation chambers are very energy inefficient. They do not have air scrubbers to capture any of the particulate matter produced during the combustion process. So mercury from dental fillings, any plastic implants in the body from a hip replacement or mesh from a hernia repair, all of that just goes up through the chimney, into the atmosphere, into the air that we breathe. Newer cremation facilities have an air scrubber that captures some of that emission. And they tend to be more efficient using a little less natural gas. So we partnered with a cremation facility that has a very new cremation chamber with the most advanced air scrubber. And then we also purchase carbon credits to offset the 500-600 pounds of CO2 emitted during the process. That was the only way we felt comfortable offering it when we had entered the community and entered this space offering aquamation, which has a very negligible carbon footprint. So low emission cremation is not as environmentally friendly as aquamation, but it is better than the older cremation chambers that do not have any air scrubbers or any technology that removes the particulate matter. Did that answer your question?
So, one more. So how does aquamation itself work? Whatever we haven't talked about so far.
Right. So the very innocuous way of presenting aquamation is, it's just an environmentally friendly alternative to fire cremation. It uses an alkaline solution, which we circulate around the body. It accomplishes the same goal as fire cremation, removing the part of the body that breaks down after death so bone remains can be returned to the family. The more in-depth explanation is that the process is called alkaline hydrolysis. When we die, in the absence of cellular respiration, our cells become very acidic. And that acidity of our cells is what breaks down the body. And that is what would happen during green or natural burial, which is what the majority of people on the planet practice. Most people don't embalm. It's what all of our ancestors did. The body breaks down naturally in the soil. So what we do with alkaline hydrolysis is that we're using a base rather than an acid, and we are breaking down the body in a very similar way to the way it breaks down during green burial. Essentially, the carbohydrates, fats, and proteins in the body are converted into amino acids. So what we have is an amino acid solution, and the bone remains left over. And this is an alternative to the soft tissue of the body going up through a chimney in the form of soot and toxic and carcinogenic gases. I'm surprised no one asked that yet. That's the biggest question we get. The amino acid solution goes to the water treatment facility and then becomes a part of the Eno River watershed, which I think one thing we noticed early on, we would talk to people about aquamation, and that was actually the first question people ask. Well, what do you do with the liquid? And I think because with cremation, the soot and the gas just dissipates into the atmosphere, people think it disappears, right? But it doesn't soar to the heavens. It just settles on the rooftops and on the streets and then is washed away into our stormwater system, going back to the Eno River watershed. So in both cases, with cremation or aquamation, that part of the body that we're removing would make its way back to the environment and to the Eno River watershed. With us, we're directly sending it to the water treatment facility. It is completely sterile. We all are using the sewer system and flushing other things down every day. This is a sterile solution of amino acids that the people who like green burial, they like that aquamation. The amino acids are going back to the ecosystem rather than up through the chimney in the form of soot and toxic gases. For the most part, we're using about 200 gallons of water in the process, and unlike natural gas, water is not truly wasted, right? It is the water treatment facility, they're pulling from upstream and treating our water. Everything we flush down the drain in the whole community of Hillsborough is treated and then goes downstream. So it doesn't disappear. So we looked at the carbon footprint of treating that water, and it was very negligible, but we're using about 200 gallons of water.
Do you have to add water to it because it's starting to break down? Like, will some of that water be used up to hydrolyze the body, or 200 gallons is good?
So basically, the chamber fills up with a little over 100 gallons of water, which is what creates the alkaline solution. That circulates around the body. After the process, that is drained, and then there is kind of a rinse cycle afterwards. So in total, around 200 gallons, but it does depend on the size of the person. Similarly, for cremation, a heavier individual will require more natural gas and a longer cremation to cremate. Yes?
It's like you used the word reburial or maybe I just misunderstood.
Green burial?
Oh, green burial, okay, not reburial, okay.
We included, on another note, we included the human composting slide because we get so many questions about it. It's trending because it sounds so crazy, composting a body. But while we offer it, we have never had a family choose it. It is largely cost prohibitive, and flying the body to Seattle really undermines the environmental benefit of human composting. But it is another eco-friendly method of disposition. It will probably be legalized in North Carolina within 4 years. So most of the families who call us about human composting, they end up choosing aquamation or green burial. Yes?
I think that leads to one of my questions. You had a slide, I think you called it conservation. It may have been with human composting, and it was a map of the United States, and there was the green versus the non-green. And then you keep referring to Washington. I was under the impression that there were a lot of states, the green states, that it's legal, human composting, or did I misunderstand?
It is legal in those states, but the only facilities open offering it are in Washington and Oregon.
Oh,
The other states, the laws go into effect in 27 or 28, and so there are no facilities there.
I see, thank you.
Yes.
So I'm just curious about this. Do you, with aquamation, after you rinse the body, are you literally left with a skeleton?
The remains are similar to what happens after cremation. So Veronica mentioned this. There's a very common misconception that fire cremation reduces the body to ash. When I scattered my dad's ashes probably 15 years ago in California, illegally, I did not have permission to scatter where we scattered. I thought that is what the cremation process resulted in, this kind of granular sandy consistency. As it turns out, cremation reduces the body to rigid pieces of bone that are recognizable, pelvis or femur or teeth. By law, in every state in the US, every funeral home, crematorium, aquamation facility has to break those down into a dust unless a family member, unless a person signs a form claiming a religious exemption prior to their death. So we've had 3 people come in and claim a religious exemption. You don't have to state what that religious exemption is. You just have to check a box, and then we are allowed to return the bone fragments. But most people don't want their family members getting back bone fragments. So what we encounter after aquamation is very similar to what you encounter after cremation. It's just rigid pieces of bone. But with aquamation, they have not been charred because they're not being heated at 1800 degrees. What we return is a fine white powder that is just our skeletal structure, calcium phosphate. There are no toxic or carcinogenic compounds in the ashes that we return, so they're much better for mixing with a soil amendment, planting a tree, or scattering.
Was it a challenge for y'all to get used to dealing with remains?
Okay. Veronica knows how impulsive I am. We quit our jobs right after we got married at this little nonprofit in Chapel Hill, and we backpacked abroad for a year instead of having a wedding. When I read the Desmond Tutu article and came home and told her I wanted to open an aquamation facility, the machine was $300,000, right? Nothing insignificant. And we didn't. I'm not a licensed funeral director. We do employ licensed funeral directors. We are a full funeral home. But I told her, I want to offer this in this area. This is an incredible community. I love living here. Our cemeteries are nearing capacity. This is an amazing place to offer eco-friendly death care. Let's do it. I flew to Las Vegas a few months later to train on how to use the aquamation machine. And they brought out a body, and I passed out. So I called Veronica, and I said, Veronica, I don't know if we can do this. All we've been talking about is death and dying, death of loved ones. I don't want to be around dead bodies. I don't want to talk about death. Why didn't we open up a coffee shop or a restaurant or something else more positive? We tell people what we're going to do, and they don't want to talk to us. I want to tell people what we do and have them get excited about it. Like, ooh, I want to come to your coffee shop. And I was like, I don't know if we can do this. And she said, Hunter, get your shit together. We spent $300,000 on this machine. We are opening Endswell. And we've now helped over 400 families. We've had probably 800 people in the community sign up with us. We just envisioned something very different for a funeral home. Not just in our decor. You won't find maroon carpet and floral wallpaper and a Reader's Digest on the church pew off to the side. It doesn't feel very anachronistic. But also, one thing we realized is that funeral homes are open 365 days a year, 24 hours a day. They provide an absolutely necessary service to the community, but they don't engage with the community decades before death or after death in the form of grief groups. So we have 8 presentations at the Durham Library this year, some of which have nothing to do with Endswell. It's Native American death care practices with the Occaneechi Saponi and Sissipaha. It's the Havre Kaddish coming in from the synagogues to talk about Jewish death care practices. We're trying to create content and resources and information for the community about anatomical gift programs, everything related to this space so people can be prepared and informed, even if it doesn't relate to our services at Endswell.
Thank you. Good job. I was just going to say, regarding your question about getting used to this, one thing that I think we knew going in, okay, Hunter had to get his shit together and be able to handle this. But beyond that, we were like, okay, we know we'll be interacting with bodies, and that's challenging and scary. I never thought I was going to work at Endswell. My intention was, okay, you go do that. I'm going to stay over here in my career in utility scale solar energy. I'm very happy, love my job. But I was helping him, as one does when your partner opens a business, and it was the connections with the family. They're incredibly intimate connections, And yes, they're temporary, they're brief, but you become someone that people can lean on during some of the darkest times in their lives. And to play that role is a complete honor. Like that is, I mean, there's so much meaning in that I very quickly realized when we were talking to our families and helping our families that I did not want to sit behind a computer screen negotiating contracts with Duke Energy and arguing over how many times we were going to cut the grass each year. I wanted to be with families, and sometimes that is through a very beautiful, ritualistic cleansing of the body and shrouding of the body, but sometimes it's just being there and hearing them talk about their loved one and telling stories about this time that their husband gave a kid at the music store a drum that was in his car because he could tell the kid really wanted to learn how to play and he didn't need it anymore. And those moments, that's why Hunter and I both do this work. That's what's meaningful.
So I know this is going to sound weird. It's also fun. I was at UNC SecU House, the hospice in Pittsburgh, and this guy told me he was 3 days away from death, and he said, when I die, I want you to break into my apartment. I'm going to tell you where the hidden key is outside. It's under this little garden gnome. And I want you to get my kayak, and then I want you to go to Trader Joe's. Here's $50, and I want you to get cheap wine, and I want you to fill the kayak with ice. And when all my kayaking and whitewater rafting friends come, I want all the cheap wine to be sitting in the kayak so they're on ice. And all of his friends came for his memorial service, and that's what they encountered. And it was completely unexpected. It felt like he was pranking them from beyond, because he had told me 3 days before he died that's what he wanted. We helped a family the other day, and the family dropped off clothing for this person. Veronica and I were at Endswell for 13 hours last Saturday. We thought it was going to be a day off, farmer's market. So at 9 o'clock at night, we decide to dress this person. Veronica opens up the clothing, and it's just 8 orange sheets. No armholes, no leg holes. We call the family, and this person starts laughing, and they're like, oh, she's like a nun or something. And we're like, well, from where? So she was a Tibetan Buddhist monk. So we had to call a monastery. Veronica watched 8 YouTube videos and learn how to wrap all of these sheets with no armholes or leg holes. And she did a beautiful job. But we felt like we were being pranked when we were trying to prepare this person for a viewing the next day. The different cultural practices we encounter, how people process grief, the family members who come in and talk shit about their loved one, or they tell wonderful stories, or you get the most authentic interaction with them that you ever get with anyone. I mean, they are bearing all to you. That is meaningful, but it's also very fun. So.
What is the pH of your alkaline solution and also the effluent?
So the pH of the aquamation solution starts at about a 13. It ends at about a 10 or 11 on the pH scale. As it turns out, water treatment facilities run a very acidic environment. As the bacteria are breaking down waste that we all send to the water treatment facility every day, a lot of acid is produced. So they actually add potassium hydroxide to offset the acidity. That is the same thing we use in the aquamation process. So when we met with our water treatment facility about a week after I put a deposit on the machine, they were like, oh my God, this is wonderful. This is what we do. I wish people would send more alkaline fluid our way. So as it turns out, it's beneficial for the water treatment facility. Anything else? If any of you all are interested in green burial, I would encourage you to visit Blue Stem. It is really unlike any cemetery I've ever seen. the support they provide after death, the number of people who have buried a loved one who return to be a part of a burial crew and help bury another person there. It's really amazing. You don't find that anywhere else. It's a nonprofit. And then we at Endswell, we have monthly information sessions, death cafes, and we just rolled out a speaker series and documentary series where every month we'll be screening a documentary about green burial or someone dying in hospice care who wanted to take hallucinogenic drugs like psilocybin as they die to cope with their terminal illness and become one with the universe. So we just screen documentaries every month now at Endswell. So. Yeah, of course.
I just want to say thanks to you both. We really appreciate your time and your information, and it's been fascinating.